Here we are with a brief chapter overview of Chapter 7, the late Roman Empire, and the emergence of the medieval world or Middle Ages. So it begins talking about Diocletian, the last of the emperors to persecute Christianity, but also the guy who kind of divides the empire into two parts. And it'll never quite be the same again. And in those two parts of like a diocese for within the Catholic Church is named for Diocletian, kind of that split up of it. But you've got a tetrarchy, a rule by four. So you got the western half over here with Rome, and then you've got this eastern half over here. And tetrarchy, like a tetrahedron, has four sides, so it's dealing with four. And Diocletian steps down. He has gout. He's actually the only emperor to retire, as he does. And several people fight for sort of re-emergence of, or for power and to merge the empire together again. And the person who is victorious in that endeavor is Constantine. Constantine will relocate the empire's capital to, or part of it, to Constantinople, which was over on the other, located roughly around where the mouse is moving in that little tiny tip of a peninsula there. Talks some about his military maneuvers, as well as the building program in Constantinople, which is today Istanbul. There's a whole song now, it's Istanbul, not Constantinople, as it's sort of this planned Christian city. And the Christianity theme was key because at the Battle of Milvian Bridge, Constantine said that he sees a Christian symbol in the sky, and he kind of hears this voice, "In the sign you will conquer," just like that. And he wins the battle and gives credit to God. And then in the very next year, in 313, the Edict of Milan is issued, mentioned on page 202, which is a key document because what that does is it allows Christianity to be protected and tolerated. So Christianity had been largely persecuted for going on close to 300 years, about 250 years at this point, and now it can grow and it can thrive legally. And that means it's really going to boom, and it will also allow the church to organize better, and so the organization of that will change, and as the church gets bigger and more bureaucratic in a way. Then it mentions the end of the Western Empire, because the split becomes permanent. The split that Diocletian initiated became permanent in 395, and now I got this problem with all of these kind of German groups and invaders. This area, if you go to the funky Denmark Peninsula and sort of head south, all of this is the Germanic territory, and you got the Franks, the Vandals, the Visigoths, the Ostrogoths, here a Goth, there a Goth, everywhere a Goth. These are kind of like your Capital One commercial pillager guys, except they're not as nice. They're hairy, they're brutal, they're on the move, and this threat of these Germanic tribes upends the Roman Empire. So lots of problems as they ultimately force the Roman Empire basically to collapse, with the leaders of the empire not as powerful. That will again open the door more for the new church officials to become powerful. And it mentions Alaric, who on page 206, who actually sacked the city of Rome the first time Rome was attacked in hundreds of years, in the year 410. So now we've got all these crazy Germanic kingdoms, including the Franks, which is who France is named for today, but the Franks are originally German. Here we've got an image of Clovis, who became the first of the Frankish kings to convert to Christianity. And Catholic, the word Catholic, when we're throwing that in there, Catholic means universal. This is not a time where you could go out in your chariot and look to the left and see Baptist church, and look to the right and see Catholic, and then a Methodist, and an AME, and a Lutheran, and a Presbyterian, and a Pentecostal. We don't have those. Those don't exist for about 1,000 more years. The Catholic Church means the universal church. So that's what Catholic means. For anyone who goes to any of us who go to Protestant churches, and you are repeating the Apostles' Creed, and you say, I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the communion of saints, and you say, wait a second, I don't go to a Catholic church. Catholic means universal. So now we see more, kind of like with Alexander the Great, and these merging of cultures. We got the same thing happening here in chapter 7. We got a merging of cultures. The Frankish kings merging with this Christianity, which at one point had been persecuted but was now growing. Mentions other Germans, the Angles and the Saxons, some of the other Germanic features of the Vulgate. But here we get back into page 213, this development of the Christian church, some of the key features there. Augustine mentions on page 214 St. Jerome and his Vulgate, the Latin Vulgate, completed around the year 405. And this Vulgate was key because this is the only Bible that will be allowed for over 1,000 years. So the Old Testament, which was originally written in Hebrew, and the New Testament, which was originally in Greek, he converts both of those to Latin. So this becomes the common Bible that's around for a long time. Gets into the powers of popes, monks, and the development of monasticism. Monks were really key for education, because when the empire starts falling apart and you got these crazy Germanic tribes everywhere, it's the monks who are largely copying ancient texts. So much of what we have that was written at that time is thanks to the monks, people who are seeking to live a life devoted to God. It talks about the roles of abbots, mentions convents for women who become nuns there and who are cloistered together on page 218. One of the ironic things about convents is we think of that in 2013 as being pretty restrictive, not much freedom and liberty, but for a lot of women, this was one of the most liberating things they could do, ironically, was to go join a convent. If they went and became a nun, they're not forced into an arranged marriage that they don't want. This is the only way they might learn to read and write. They can do things here, like go into town for errands on their own. They can take care of children and take care of the sick. They've ironically got more freedom than they would have in other life situations. And other women who went were sent by families, but convents will develop for nuns. I mentioned some had been in the desert as well, but then it gets more into their the nuns on page 220. Then it gets into the Byzantine Empire, a word that people don't like to spell or say very often. Basically, the Byzantine Empire is the same thing as the eastern half of the empire. So it remains Christian. It retains its Roman traditions, but it's based out of Constantinople. Justinian plays a huge role in trying to regain land that had been lost to the Germanic tribes. You see how much he gains. Also codifies the Roman law, which was really important. We still kind of rely on that civil code that he did today to say, okay, we've got thousands and thousands of laws. We got to be able to order them somehow and organize them. So that was a key thing. It mentions Theodora, one of the powerful female rulers. The building program he has, but we see the empire getting smaller and smaller here from this under Justinian to just this a few hundred years later. And a large part of this is due to the infighting over iconoclasm mentioned on page 229. I was just looking at my book. It looks like iconodasm, but that would be a CL, iconoclasm, not iconodasm. And there's a lot of infighting in the Byzantine Empire over the use of images. People who are worshipping images, saying instead of living by faith, they believe certain images or artistic pieces have spiritual power. And that will lead to a divide. It's the first time the Catholic Church will break into the Orthodox Church, as it mentions on page 229, the Greek Orthodox Church, the Eastern Orthodox Church. And so say, okay, why is this iconoclasm thing significant? It leads to the first break in the Catholic Church, people who have a differing view. But also that infighting allows enemies to kind of, if they're busy bickering with one another, enemies have been able to encroach more and more on their land, which will set us up soon for the mess and disaster that is the Crusades. But before that, Constantinople had been so secure, protected by water, protected by multiple layers of walls. So if it was safe, that meant educated, wealthy people went there. So Constantinople, while the rest of Europe was falling apart and falling by the wayside, Constantinople had continued to thrive, but there is some infighting over iconoclasm. And then it gets into, we had the emergence of Christianity in the last chapter. Now we get into the emergence of Islam, which is formed in the 600s, so about 600 years after Christianity. These two cities here in what is today Saudi Arabia are key, Medina and Mecca. It mentions Muhammad, who will become the main prophet of the God of Islam, Allah. Muhammad is from Mecca, but in the year 622, he's trying to tell people he's had these religious experiences, and he's trying to win followers, but he's sort of forced out to Medina in what's known as the Hijra, which means the departure. And that's a key date, 622, because in Islam there's another calendar, and the Hijra becomes year 1 in that calendar when Muhammad sort of flees to Medina. He gains followers in Medina, comes back to Mecca in 630, and is able to conquer Mecca. And Islam will then rapidly spread as well. Those 5 tenets are the 5 pillars are the 5 main tenets of what they believe. The first one there, that Allah is God and Muhammad is his prophet. There's prayer 5 times a day facing Mecca. Ramadan, so certain fasting requirements. A pilgrimage for all who are physically able, and giving aid to those who are poor or in need. So kind of the 5 main things you're expected to do as a Muslim, as one who submits to Allah, which is what that means. So their beliefs will be written in the Quran. Muhammad does not write the Quran. His followers write it after he dies, saying, oh gosh, we better have a way to preserve this. So it's the caliphs who then take over after Muhammad dies. Mentions jihad, which is largely misinterpreted today as this holy war, but it's a striving. It's supposed to be an inner striving. I bet the National Security Agency has tagged me just for saying the word. It makes me kind of nervous. But a striving, an inner striving. And so the religion will continue to grow. They have a pretty early split between the Sunnis and Shiites, and that split is still present today, and there can be some infighting there, and it dealt largely over who would succeed Muhammad as leader of the religion. But that is where we wrap up with chapter 7.